No one imagined that this boy, born into a poor family, would become the richest and most powerful man of his time, but also the most hated. He didn't just build an oil empire that dominated the United States. He gave modern capitalism a new meaning through highly questionable methods. Was he a genius who pushed the country toward progress, or a ruthless man who achieved success at the cost of destroying thousands? This is the story of a man whose hunger for control made him an enemy of his own country. John Davison Rockefeller Sr. was born on July 8, 1839, in Richford, New York. He was the second of 6 children. His mother, Eliza Davison, was a religious, organized, and disciplined woman. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was the complete opposite, an unreliable traveling salesman. He pretended to be a doctor, selling miracle tonics from town to town, vanished without warning, and lied as easily as he breathed. He seduced women with fake stories and fathered children outside of marriage, something John wouldn't learn until years later. The household was unstable. While his mother taught obedience, saving, and discipline, his father preached cunning, manipulation, and distrust, and John grew up absorbing both worlds. From a young age, he learned to be suspicious of appearances, to count every penny, and to measure people by their usefulness. By age 7, he was earning his first coins raising turkeys, digging up potatoes, and selling candy. At 13, he lent money to a neighbor with interest and wrote the loan down in a notebook, a habit he never gave up. That's how Rockefeller was born, the same man who, decades later, would control over 90% of the oil in the United States. At 16, John got his first job as an assistant bookkeeper at a produce firm in Cleveland. He worked over 12 hours a day for 50 cents. From then on, he kept a journal where he recorded every cent he earned or spent. That notebook became like a personal Bible to him, and he kept it for life. It wasn't out of obsession, but necessity, according to him. If you don't control your money, you don't control your life. Time passed, and at 20, along with a partner, he founded his first company, Clark and Rockefeller. They sold grain, meat, and supplies to the Union Army during the Civil War. And while thousands died on the battlefield, Rockefeller discovered something more valuable than oil: the power of supply. He made his first serious capital by supplying an entire country at war without firing a single bullet. Rockefeller wasn't in a rush. He had a plan. He always reinvested, calculated, and reinvested again. For him, wealth wasn't a matter of luck. It was like an equation. And like any equation, if you master the variables, you control the outcome. That quiet young man was no longer just a bookkeeper. He was building something bigger, something that would later change the course of modern capitalism. In 1863, at the age of 24, Rockefeller made a bold move that would define his future. He entered the oil business, an industry still in its infancy. While most people saw barrels and fast money, he saw an opportunity to control every part of the business. He bought a small refinery in Cleveland that was barely staying afloat, and even though it was modest, Rockefeller didn't care. He was after efficiency. He slashed costs, increased productivity, and improved the quality of kerosene, the star product of the time, all with an almost obsessive fixation on numbers and control. He quickly realized something his competitors didn't. The real power wasn't just in producing oil, but in controlling how it moved. So, he began negotiating with railroad companies. He offered them consistent, massive volumes in exchange for preferential rates, with one condition: they had to charge his competitors more. It was a masterstroke. While Standard Oil saved money, the others couldn't survive. His tactics were simple but effective. He made offers others couldn't match, weakened his rivals, and bought out their companies once they were too fragile to continue. And if they didn't sell, he crushed them slowly with his own company. Meanwhile, Rockefeller kept a low profile, avoiding public attention while gaining power exponentially. Standard Oil Company was born with one goal: to dominate the market at all costs. It was the beginning of an empire, one that would forever transform the U.S. economy. By 1870, Rockefeller had consolidated his operations under the name Standard Oil. But it wasn't just a brand, it was a machine of control. In a market without clear rules, Rockefeller made his own. He bought refineries, eliminated competitors, and signed secret deals with railroads so that no one else could ship oil without paying him a fortune. In less than a decade, he turned the industry into a complete monopoly. But the real genius, or monster, of Rockefeller wasn't in how he refined oil. It was in how he controlled the entire process. While his competitors focused on just one piece of the business, he wanted control over every step, from the barrels that held crude oil to the boats and trains that transported imported it, and even the stores that sold kerosene. That way, he earned more, and, at the same time, made it impossible for others to compete. Anyone who tried has to use resources that, directly or indirectly, were already owned by Rockefeller. Some businessmen tried to resist, but Standard Oil played dirty. It used shell companies to secretly buy out rivals, sabotage their businesses, and offered prices so low it drove them to bankruptcy. Then, Rockefeller bought everything at bargain prices. The press began calling him the octopus, because his tentacles reached everywhere. But what scared people most wasn't his size, it was his invisibility. No one knew how far his power stretched. By the late 19th century, John D. Rockefeller was the most powerful figure in the country. He controlled over 90% of the oil market, dictated prices, conditions, and even political decisions. In cities across the US, people used kerosene to light their homes, and almost all of it, and you might guess, belonged to him. His wealth grew at such an astonishing pace that even the government began to feel uneasy. Standard Oil wasn't just a company anymore, it was a state within the state. Public opinion began turning against him, and his image as a discreet and devout man started to fall apart. Under pressure from the press and ruined small business owners, the government launched antitrust investigations. But Rockefeller was slippery. He used intermediaries and built an almost impenetrable legal network. While he defended his efficiency, thousands of small businesses vanished, thousands of families lost their jobs, and the American dream started to seem like an illusion reserved for people like him. Rockefeller had become more than a businessman. He was a symbol of everything that could go wrong when capital had no limits. And, at this point, John believed no one could stop him, and for years, he was right. Ida Tarbell was the daughter of a small oil businessman ruined by Standard Oil. For years, she investigated documents, interviewed victims, and published a series of articles exposing Rockefeller's monopolistic practices. Her reporting also pressured the government, and in 1906, the Department of Justice filed a historic lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act. In 1911, after years of trial, the Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and ordered its breakup. Rockefeller didn't say a word publicly, but privately, he chose not to resist. Why did he give in so easily? Because he already owned shares in all the companies that would emerge after the split. When Standard Oil was broken into 34 new companies, including Exxon, Mobil, and Chevron, the value of his shares skyrocketed. He lost his company, yes, but he doubled his fortune. By then, he was the first billionaire in modern history. The government had beaten him legally, but no one could strip away the economic power he now held. Rockefeller retired not long after, already old, but the cost of his power was still being carried by others. Ruined families, destroyed businesses, and dreams that never came true. In his final years, he turned part of his fortune into scholarships, libraries, medical institutions, and research centers. He gave away over $500 million. He founded the University of Chicago, created the Rockefeller Foundation, and revolutionized public health systems in several countries. On the surface, it looked like redemption, but many said it was just an effort to clean up the image he had built over the years. Because even though they now called him the great philanthropist, thousands of families still remembered the businesses he destroyed. In public, Rockefeller was seen as a kind old man handing out coins to children. But had he really changed? Maybe he never sought forgiveness. Maybe he only sought control right up to the end, even control over how he would be remembered. He died in 1937 at the age of 97, surrounded by luxury, but also by shadows. His story is that of a boy who sought order in the midst of chaos, and who found absolute power as his refuge. He didn't speak much, he left no trace unless it was necessary, but every step he took was carefully calculated. His life was a masterpiece of control, a control that made him rich, at the cost of making many others poor. Because, in the end, Rockefeller wasn't just a man, he was an idea. The idea that if you're disciplined enough, cold enough, and patient enough, you can shape the world to your will. But what happens when one man's success depends on the ruin of thousands?